The anomaly first appeared on Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Hayes' radar at 3:47 hours, 30,000 feet above the Nevada desert. A single aircraft, unscheduled, flying a pattern that made his blood run cold. The blip moved with precision that spoke of military training, yet no flight plan existed in the system. No transponder code. No radio contact. Control Viper 1. I've got an unknown contact, bearing 270, altitude Angels 30. Request immediate identification. Static crackled through his headset before the response came, tinged with confusion. Viper 1 Control. No scheduled traffic in your sector. Approach and identify. Hayes banked his F-22 Raptor left, the desert stars wheeling overhead as he closed distance. Through his night vision display, the aircraft materialized. A sleek F-35 Lightning II, its stealth profile cutting through darkness like a ghost returning from the grave. But something was wrong. The flight pattern wasn't random wandering or equipment malfunction. It was deliberate, methodical, tracing coordinates that triggered memories he tried to bury. Control target is military, F-35 Lightning, but the trajectory. Hayes paused, cross-referencing the pattern against his mental database of classified missions. Jesus Christ. Control, I need immediate verification on Team Echo's last known flight path from Operation Nightfall. The silence stretched longer than protocol allowed. When Control's voice returned, it carried weight that made Hayes' stomach drop. Viper 1, that information is classified above your clearance level. Maintain visual contact but do not engage. Through his canopy, Hayes watched the mysterious F-35 execute a turn so precise it could have been drawn with a ruler. The aircraft's movement spoke of a pilot who knew these coordinates by heart, who had flown this route before under circumstances that demanded perfection. But Team Echo had been declared KIA 18 months ago, their final mission scrubbed from official records, their names carved into black granite at Arlington. Viper 2, you seeing this? Hayes radioed his wingman, Captain Sarah Chen, flying parallel 3 miles out. Copy Viper 1, that's some flying down there. Whoever's at the stick knows what they're doing. But Hayes already suspected who might be at those controls, and if his suspicions were correct, tonight would rewrite everything they thought they knew about the mission that never officially happened, and the pilot who was supposed to have died completing it. The desert below held secrets deeper than any grave, and 30,000 feet above the sand, the truth was finally coming home. The F-35 banked again, following coordinates that led toward a memory most of the military had tried to forget, flown by a ghost who refused to stay buried. Hayes maintained pursuit distance, his F-22's advanced sensors painting detailed pictures of the aircraft ahead. The Lightning moved with fluid grace, each maneuver executed with textbook precision that spoke of thousands of training hours. But there was something else, a familiarity in the flight pattern that made his pulse quicken. Control, Viper 1 requesting full background on any F-35 squadrons, with authorization for this airspace. Negative, Viper 1. All Lightning squadrons are accounted for and grounded for scheduled maintenance. The aircraft you're tracking should not exist. Should not exist. The words echoed in Hayes' mind as he watched the mystery pilot execute a barrel roll so smooth it looked effortless. Through his heads-up display, thermal imaging revealed the F-35's engine signature, single Pratt & Whitney F-135, burning clean and steady. Real aircraft, real pilot, real fuel burning in real time. Viper 2, close to visual range but maintained safe distance. Something about this whole situation stinks. Chen's F-22 moved into position, her voice steady despite the strangeness of their situation. Copy, lead. I'm picking up intermittent radio chatter on emergency frequencies. Can't make it out clearly. Hayes adjusted his radio to emergency band 243 and immediately heard what Chen had detected, fragments of voice transmission, barely audible through static. A woman's voice, calm and professional, reciting coordinates that matched the flight path below. Echo 7 to Overwatch, continuing waypoint sequence. Payload status nominal. Weather conditions optimal for final approach. The blood drained from Hayes' face. Echo 7 had been the call sign of Major Valentina Wraith Kozlov, Team Echo's lead pilot. The woman who'd volunteered for a one-way mission deep into enemy territory 18 months ago. The woman whose memorial service Hayes had attended, whose empty coffin had been draped with an American flag. Control, I need immediate patch to Colonel Morrison at Nellie's. Priority Alpha. Viper 1, Colonel Morrison is not available at. Then wake him up, Hayes barked. I'm tracking Echo 7, and unless someone cloned Valentina Kozlov, we've got a problem that goes way above both our pay grades. The silence from control stretched long enough for Hayes to count his heartbeats. Below them, the F-35 maintained course toward coordinates that weren't on any official map, following a flight plan that had been classified beyond recognition. If Kozlov had somehow survived Operation Nightfall, if she'd been flying ghost missions for the past year and a half, then everything the military had told the world about Team Echo was a lie. Viper 1, Colonel Morrison is en route to command. Maintain surveillance but do not attempt contact with the target aircraft. Repeat, do not attempt radio contact. Hayes watched Kozlov's lightning disappear into a cloud bank, its navigation lights blinking in sequence. 3 short, 3 long, 3 short. SOS in light. A distress signal that made no sense for a pilot in complete control of her aircraft, unless she was signaling something else entirely. Colonel James Morrison arrived at Nellie's Air Force Base Command Center, still buttoning his service dress uniform, his weathered face grim in the fluorescent lighting. The duty officer snapped to attention, but Morrison waved off the formality as he studied the tactical display showing 2 F-22s shadowing an unidentified F-35. How long has this been going on? Morrison's voice carried the authority of 30 years in military aviation. 47 minutes, sir. The unknown aircraft maintains a steady flight path matching classified coordinates from Operation Nightfall. Morrison's jaw tightened. Operation Nightfall wasn't supposed to exist in any official capacity. The mission had been scrubbed from records, its participants declared KIA to maintain operational security. But if someone was flying Kozlov's exact route, they knew details that only a handful of people should possess. Sir, Viper 1 is requesting permission to establish radio contact. Negative. Maintain observation only. Morrison pulled up archived files on his secure terminal, his fingers moving across classified databases with practiced efficiency. What's the aircraft's current heading? 285 degrees, maintaining 30,000 feet. Speed steady at Mach 0.8. Morrison cross-referenced the coordinates against Operation Nightfall's original mission parameters. The flight path was perfect, too perfect for someone working from stolen intelligence. This was muscle memory, instinct honed by repetition, the kind of precision that came from flying the same route dozens of times. In the air above Nevada, Hayes watched the F-35 emerge from cloud cover, its stealth profile visible only because of his F-22's advanced sensors. Through night vision, he could make out details of the aircraft's configuration, external fuel tanks for extended range, hard points that had recently carried ordnance, and markings that weren't standard Air Force. Viper 2, you getting a close look at her payload configuration? Chen's voice crackled through the radio. Affirmative, lead. She's configured for long-range penetration. Full external tanks, AGM-158 mounting points. This bird's been modified for deep strike. Control. We need to know who authorized modifications to an F-35 for Operation Nightfall specifications. The pause from control lasted long enough for Hayes to complete a full systems check. When Morrison's voice came through directly, it carried weight that made both pilots straighten in their cockpits. Viper Flight, this is Colonel Morrison. You are to maintain surveillance and report any deviation from current flight path. Do not attempt to intercept or communicate. That is a direct order. Hayes exchanged glances with his wingman through their canopies. Morrison's tone suggested they were dealing with something far more complex than an unauthorized flight. If the colonel was personally managing the situation, it meant someone very high up the chain of command was involved. Below them, Kozlov's F-35 began a gradual descent, following terrain features that would mask its approach from ground-based radar. The maneuver was textbook stealth tactics, executed with precision that spoke of recent combat experience. "She's good," Chen observed, "really good." Hayes watched the lightning II disappear into a mountain valley, its heat signature vanishing against the desert floor. Whoever was flying that aircraft wasn't just skilled, they were flying like someone with nothing left to lose. Major Valentina Kozlov adjusted her oxygen mask and checked her instruments as the F-35 descended through 20,000 feet. The familiar weight of the flight suit, the subtle vibration of the Pratt & Whitney engine, the green glow of displays, all exactly as she remembered from 18 months of flying missions that never officially happened. Through her heads-up display, she tracked the two F-22s maintaining overwatch position. Professional pilots, keeping proper distance while gathering intelligence. She appreciated their restraint. Lesser aviators might have attempted aggressive intercepts, forced radio contact, compromised the delicate operation she'd spent months planning. Echo 7 to Overwatch, approaching waypoint Delta. Weather remains optimal for final approach. Static answered her transmission, but that was expected. Overwatch had gone dark when Operation Nightfall was officially terminated. Its participants declared casualties of a training accident that never made the news. The truth was more complex, more dangerous, and buried under classification levels that most generals would never see. Kozlov banked the lightning left, following a dry riverbed that would mask her approach to the target zone. Below, moonlight painted the Nevada desert in silver and shadow, the same landscape she'd memorized during months of preparation for a mission that was supposed to end with her death. Instead, she'd survived. Survived the insertion, the primary objective, the extraction that went sideways when enemy forces proved better prepared than intelligence had suggested. Survived 18 months of hiding, of planning, of gathering evidence about why Team Echo had been sacrificed to protect a secret that threatened to destroy everything they'd sworn to defend. Her hands moved across the F-35's controls with practiced ease, muscle memory guiding actions her conscious mind didn't need to direct. This aircraft wasn't stolen. It was hers, assigned and modified specifically for missions that required a pilot willing to cross lines that others wouldn't even acknowledge existed. The radio crackled with encrypted transmissions as her pursuers reported position and status. She recognized the professionalism in their voices, the careful precision of pilots who understood they were witnessing something beyond their clearance level. They deserved to know the truth, but truth was a luxury she couldn't afford until her mission was complete. Echo 7 beginning final approach to target zone, all systems nominal. Through her canopy, stars wheeled overhead in patterns that had guided navigators for millennia. But tonight, Kozlov was navigating by coordinates that led to answers buried in classified files, protected by men who'd rather see her dead than see their secrets exposed. The F-35's terrain-following radar painted detailed pictures of the landscape ahead, rocky outcroppings that would provide cover, valleys that would mask her approach, and 50 miles ahead, a facility that didn't exist on any official map but housed secrets worth killing for. Captain Sarah Chen watched the F-35's heat signature disappear against the desert floor, impressed despite herself by the precision of the terrain-following approach. Whoever was flying that Lightning II possessed skills that rivaled the best pilots she'd encountered in 10 years of military aviation. Viper 1 target has gone dark, lost thermal contact in the valley system. Hayes' voice carried frustration tinged with professional admiration. Copy 2. She's using the terrain like she owns it. This isn't someone playing with stolen aircraft. This is a combat pilot with intimate knowledge of stealth tactics. Through her night vision display, Chen scanned the rocky landscape below. The F-35 could be anywhere in a dozen square miles of canyon country, hidden against thermal backgrounds that would mask even the most sophisticated sensors. It was masterful flying, the kind that came from real-world experience in contested airspace. Control Viper 2. We've lost contact with the target aircraft. Request guidance on search pattern. Colonel Morrison's voice came back immediately, suggesting he'd been monitoring their frequency continuously. Negative, Viper flight. RTB immediately. This operation is now classified beyond your clearance level. Return to base. The order carried finality that brooked no argument, but Chen found herself reluctant to abandon the mystery. Professional curiosity warred with military discipline as she banked her F-22 toward 9’s. Lead, something about this whole situation doesn't add up. That pilot knew we were tracking her, knew exactly how to evade our sensors. She wanted us to follow her to a specific point, then disappear. Hayes' F-22 formed up alongside hers as they climbed toward cruise altitude. I'm thinking the same thing, too. Question is, what was she trying to show us? Below them, the Nevada desert stretched empty and dark, hiding secrets that predated nuclear testing and black projects. But tonight, those secrets had acquired a new guardian, a pilot who was supposed to be dead, flying an aircraft that shouldn't exist, following a mission profile that had been erased from official records. As they approached 9’s, Chen caught sight of unusual activity on the ground. Additional security vehicles, personnel moving with the urgency that suggested a developing situation. Their unauthorized contact had triggered responses that went far beyond routine intercepts. Viper flight, you are directed to land immediately and report to debriefing. All flight data is classified pending review. Chen exchanged glances with her flight leader through their canopies. Classified debriefings meant someone very high up the chain of command was taking personal interest in their encounter with the ghost pilot. It also meant that whatever they'd witnessed tonight was connected to operations that existed in the shadows between official policy and military necessity. The runway lights of 9’s grew brighter as they approached, but Chen couldn't shake the feeling that the real story was just beginning, hidden somewhere in the desert darkness behind them. Deep in the Nevada desert, 50 miles from the nearest road, Kozlov brought her F-35 to a hover above a landscape that looked unchanged since the Pleistocene. But appearances deceived. Beneath the rocky surface lay a facility that had consumed black budget funding for 2 decades, its existence known only to a handful of officials with clearances that transcended conventional classification levels. She activated the Lightning's vertical landing system, feeling the aircraft settle onto a landing pad that emerged from what had appeared to be solid rock. Hidden hydraulics and camouflaged blast doors revealed the true nature of this installation, a forward operating base for missions that couldn't be acknowledged, staffed by personnel who'd officially died in training accidents. As the F-35's engine spun down, Kozlov remained in the cockpit, savoring her final moments as a pilot. After tonight, after the evidence she carried was delivered to its intended recipients, Major Valentina Kozlov would cease to exist in any meaningful sense. The woman who emerged from this aircraft would be someone else entirely, carrying a different name and a fabricated history that would allow her to disappear into civilian life. But first, the mission had to be completed. The blast doors sealed overhead as she shut down systems and removed her helmet. The familiar ritual of post-flight procedures provided comfort in an operation that had required her to abandon everything she'd known about duty, honor, and the chain of command. Sometimes, serving your country meant betraying the men who claimed to represent it. Ground crew approached her aircraft, technicians who bore no insignia, carried no identification, and existed in the gray spaces between official policy and operational necessity. They worked with efficient professionalism, preparing the F-35 for its final mission, while their pilot prepared to deliver intelligence that would end careers and destroy reputations. Kozlov climbed down from the cockpit, her flight suit bearing patches that identified her as someone who died 18 months ago. The irony wasn't lost on her. She'd become more effective as a dead woman than she'd ever been as a living officer. Major Kozlov, welcome home. The voice belonged to General Patricia Hawkins, a woman whose official biography listed her as retired but whose presence here suggested that retirement was another convenient fiction. Hawkins commanded respect through competence rather than rank, having built her career on operations that never appeared in official records. "Ma'am, the evidence you requested." Kozlov handed over a secure data storage device containing 18 months of carefully gathered intelligence, communications intercepts, financial records, operational documents that proved certain officials had sacrificed Team Echo to protect their own criminal enterprises. Hawkins accepted the device with the solemnity appropriate to evidence that would end careers and trigger investigations reaching the highest levels of government. The Senate Intelligence Committee is prepared to act on this information. Your testimony will remain classified, but justice will be served. Around them, the underground facility hummed with activity that would culminate in dawn raids across Washington, D.C., arrests that would shock the military establishment, and trials that would demonstrate the difference between serving your country and serving yourself. At Nellis Air Force Base, Hayes and Chen sat in uncomfortable chairs facing a conference table occupied by officers whose presence suggested their midnight encounter had triggered responses reaching the Pentagon. Colonel Morrison presided over the debriefing, flanked by personnel from agencies that didn't advertise their existence. "Gentlemen, what you witnessed tonight was a classified operation with national security implications. Your flight data has been reviewed and will remain classified indefinitely." Hayes shifted in his chair, professional discipline warring with curiosity about the mysterious F-35 pilot. "Sir, with respect, that pilot demonstrated capabilities that suggest extensive recent combat experience. If she's one of ours, the families of Team Echo deserve to know." Morrison's expression revealed nothing, but one of the civilian observers leaned forward with interest that seemed more than professional. "Captain Hayes, what specifically about the aircraft's performance suggested recent combat experience?" The terrain following approach was textbook, but with variations that spoke of real-world application. She wasn't flying from training manuals. She was adapting techniques learned under fire. Chen nodded agreement. "The evasion maneuvers were perfect, sir. Too perfect for simulation training. Whoever was in that cockpit has been shot at recently and survived to learn from the experience." The civilian observer made notes on a tablet that bore no identifying markings. His questions were precise, professional, designed to extract specific details about aircraft performance and pilot capabilities. Hayes recognized the pattern: intelligence gathering that would be analyzed by specialists who understood the implications of every maneuver they'd witnessed. "Colonel Morrison, are we dealing with a survivor from Operation Nightfall?" Morrison's pause stretched long enough to confirm Hayes' suspicions without violating classification protocols. "Captain, some operations require personnel to make sacrifices that extend beyond their official service. The pilot you encountered tonight has been serving her country in ways that most officers will never understand." Outside the conference room windows, dawn was breaking over the Nevada desert, painting the landscape in shades of gold that reminded Hayes of the previous night's pursuit. Somewhere in that vast emptiness, a pilot who was supposed to be dead was completing a mission that would rewrite the official history of Operation Nightfall. "Sir, will we ever know the full story?" Morrison stood, signaling the end of their debriefing. "Gentlemen, some stories are more important than the truth. Major Kozlov's sacrifice, both the official version and the reality, serves purposes larger than individual recognition. Your discretion is essential to national security." As they left the conference room, Hayes caught a final glimpse of activity that suggested the night's events were far from over. Personnel moving with urgent purpose, communications equipment being deployed, and the unmistakable preparation for operations that would begin before the morning briefings in Washington, D.C. The ghost pilot had delivered more than just evidence. She triggered a reckoning that would reshape the hidden wars America fought in the shadows. 6 months later, Hayes found himself at Arlington National Cemetery, standing before the black granite wall that bore the names of Team Echo's casualties. The morning was crisp, autumn leaves falling in patterns that reminded him of aircraft contrails dissipating in high-altitude winds. He wasn't alone. Chen stood beside him, both pilots wearing dress blues appropriate to a ceremony that hadn't been announced, but was nonetheless witnessed by officials whose presence suggested government interest at the highest levels. They'd been invited without explanation, their participation requested rather than ordered. General Patricia Hawkins approached the memorial, carrying a single white rose and wearing ribbons that identified her as a recipient of decorations that weren't listed in any public database. Her face bore the weathered dignity of someone who'd spent decades serving in capacities that couldn't be acknowledged. "Captains Hayes and Chen, thank you for attending." She placed the rose at the base of the memorial, her gesture watched by a small gathering of personnel who represented the hidden branches of military service. No media, no official recognition, just professionals paying respects to colleagues who died serving purposes larger than personal glory. "Ma'am is Major Kozlov." Hawkins' smile carried sadness tinged with pride. Major Valentina Kozlov died in service to her country 18 months ago, as officially recorded. The woman who completed her final mission last spring has assumed a different identity and is enjoying retirement in a location that will remain classified. Hayes understood the distinction. Kozlov the officer had died when Operation Nightfall was terminated, but Kozlov the person had survived to complete a mission that required her official death as operational cover. The sacrifice was both real and fictional, serving needs that transcended conventional definitions of duty. The evidence she gathered led to 17 arrests and 43 early retirements. 3 senators resigned under investigation, and certain defense contractors are facing charges that will reshape how black projects are funded and overseen. Chen placed her own rose at the memorial. "She did more than complete her mission, ma'am. She cleaned house." "Captain Chen, she did what every officer swears to do. She defended the Constitution against enemies both foreign and domestic. The fact that some of those enemies wore American uniforms makes her service more important, not less." Around them, autumn wind moved through trees that had witnessed similar ceremonies for decades, honoring sacrifices that couldn't be publicly acknowledged but were nonetheless remembered by those who understood their importance. The hidden wars required hidden heroes, and sometimes the greatest service came from being forgotten by history. As they walked away from the memorial, Hayes caught sight of a woman in civilian clothes observing from a distance. Average height, dark hair, wearing sunglasses that concealed her eyes. She could have been anyone, a tourist, a government worker, a veteran paying private respects. But something about her posture, the way she carried herself, suggested familiarity with military bearing that had been carefully concealed beneath civilian camouflage. The woman in civilian clothes maintained her distance until the official ceremony concluded, and the participants dispersed to vehicles that bore no identifying markings. Only then did she approach the memorial, her steps carrying the measured cadence of someone accustomed to military formations, despite her deliberate civilian appearance. She knelt beside the granite wall, her fingers tracing names that had been carved with precision, appropriate to permanent remembrance. Team Echo's casualties were listed in alphabetical order, their ranks and service dates providing the only official record of their existence. But one name was missing, the name of the woman who'd survived their final mission to complete a task that required her official death as operational cover. Echo 7 to Echo Team, mission complete. All objectives achieved. Weather conditions remain optimal for extraction. Her words were spoken quietly, a final radio transmission to colleagues who would never respond. But the ritual provided closure for operations that had ended without proper debriefing, without official recognition, without the ceremonies that marked successful completion of military objectives. From her jacket pocket, she removed a small object that caught morning sunlight, a set of pilot's wings bearing the distinctive markings of Special Operations Aviation. The wings had been earned through training that pushed human endurance beyond conventional limits, worn during missions that existed only in classified files, removed when their owner was declared officially dead. She placed the wings at the base of the memorial, beside roses left by officers who understood the distinction between official history and operational reality. The gesture completed a circle that had begun 18 months earlier when Major Valentina Kozlov had volunteered for a mission that required her to sacrifice everything she'd been to become someone she'd never wanted to be. Behind her, footsteps approached with the measured pace of someone who'd been waiting for this moment. She didn't turn, recognizing the gait of someone who'd shared flight lines and briefing rooms, who understood the weight of secrets that couldn't be shared with civilian friends or family members. Wraith. The voice belonged to General Hawkins, using the call sign that had identified Kozlov during operations when her real name was classified beyond recognition. It was both greeting and acknowledgement, recognizing the woman who'd existed in the spaces between official identity and operational necessity. "Ma'am, the mission is complete." "The mission was complete 6 months ago when you delivered the evidence. This is something else. This is closure." Hawkins joined her beside the memorial, two women who'd served in capacities that required them to disappear from official records while remaining present in ways that mattered more than public recognition. Their service had been measured not in medals or promotions, but in objectives achieved and threats neutralized. The Senate Intelligence Committee's final report will be classified, but the impact has been significant. Defense contracting procedures have been revised, oversight has been enhanced, and certain officials who confused personal profit with national service are facing justice. Kozlov nodded, her civilian identity carefully constructed to allow her to monitor the results of her sacrifice from a distance that provided both safety and the satisfaction of seeing justice served. "What happens now?" Kozlov asked, her voice carrying curiosity about a future that she'd never expected to see. General Hawkins considered the question with the gravity appropriate to someone who'd spent decades managing the careers of personnel who served in classified capacities. "Now, you disappear completely. New identity, new history, new life in a location where nobody will ever connect you to Major Valentina Kozlov or Operation Nightfall. And if I'm needed again?" "You won't be. The networks you exposed have been dismantled. The officials you identified have been removed from positions where they could threaten national security, and the oversight procedures you helped establish will prevent similar corruption from taking root." Around them, Arlington's grounds stretched in precise rows that honored service members who died in recognized conflicts. But this section, the black granite walls bearing names of personnel who died in operations that couldn't be acknowledged, represented a different kind of service, one that required families to accept official lies in place of the truth about their loved ones' sacrifices. Ma'am, the families of the other Team Echo members. They deserve to know their people didn't die for nothing. Hawkins' expression softened with understanding that came from delivering similar news to other families over the course of her career. Captain Hayes and Captain Chen have been briefed on the mission's success. They'll never be able to share the details, but they understand that their encounter with you was part of an operation that served essential national security interests. That's not the same as their families knowing the truth. No, it's not. But sometimes the greatest service we can perform is accepting that others will never know what we've sacrificed for their benefit. The Constitution doesn't guarantee recognition, it guarantees freedom, and freedom sometimes requires anonymous sacrifice. Kozlov understood the distinction. Her official death had provided operational cover for a mission that couldn't be acknowledged, but it had also denied her the recognition that other service members received for lesser contributions. The trade was necessary, but that didn't make it emotionally satisfying. What about you, ma'am? When do you get to retire for real? Hawkins smiled with amusement that suggested the question was more complex than it appeared. General Patricia, Hawkins retired 8 years ago. The woman standing here today serves in a different capacity, overseeing operations that require someone with my particular combination of experience and security clearances. The revelation wasn't surprising. Special operations required personnel who existed in the spaces between official policy and operational necessity, and careers that extended beyond conventional retirement provided continuity for missions that span decades rather than deployment cycles. As they walked away from the memorial, Kozlov felt the weight of transition settling around her like a familiar flight suit. The woman who'd volunteered for Operation Nightfall was finally, officially, completely dead. The person who would emerge from Arlington today would be someone else entirely. Civilian, anonymous, free to build a life that didn't require classification levels or security clearances. 3 years later, Captain Sarah Chen found herself at the controls of an F-35 Lightning II, leading a training mission over the same Nevada desert where she'd encountered the ghost pilot who changed her understanding of service and sacrifice. The irony wasn't lost on her. She was now flying the same aircraft type that had carried Major Kozlov on her final, unofficial mission. Lightning I to control, beginning approach to target zone. Weather conditions optimal for training exercise. The radio procedures were routine, the mission parameters straightforward, but Chen couldn't shake memories of that night when professional duty had intersected with operations that existed beyond conventional military structure. Her promotion to major had come with assignments that provided glimpses into the hidden wars America fought in shadows, and she'd learned to recognize the difference between official policy and operational reality. Through her heads-up display, the desert landscape painted itself in familiar patterns, rocky outcroppings that would provide cover, valleys that would mask approaches, and terrain features that had guided navigation for pilots who flew missions that were never officially acknowledged. The landscape held secrets, but she'd learned that some secrets served purposes larger than individual curiosity. Lightning II, maintain formation and prepare for terrain following exercise. Her wingman acknowledged the instruction with professional competence that reminded Chen of her own development as a pilot. Training exercises like this one would prepare the next generation of aviators for missions they couldn't yet imagine, in service of objectives they might never be allowed to understand completely. As they descended toward the desert floor, Chen spotted something that made her pulse quicken, a small memorial cairn constructed from local stone, positioned at coordinates that weren't marked on any official map, but were burned into her memory from that night 3 years earlier. Someone had built a monument where no monument should exist, honoring service that couldn't be officially acknowledged. Control, Lightning I. Request permission to deviate from flight plan for visual inspection of ground feature. Lightning 1, maintain current heading. No deviations authorized. But Chen had already seen what she needed to see. Evidence that Major Valentina Kozlov hadn't been forgotten by the people who understood the true scope of her sacrifice. The memorial was small, unofficial, constructed by someone who'd wanted to mark the spot where a pilot had completed her final mission in service of principles larger than personal recognition. As they climbed back toward cruise altitude, Chen caught sight of a civilian aircraft in the distance. A small single-engine plane following a tourist route that provided scenic views of the desert landscape. Nothing unusual about civilian aviation in this area, but something about the aircraft's precise navigation and steady course suggested a pilot with skills that exceeded recreational flying requirements. Through binoculars, she glimpsed the pilot briefly, a woman with dark hair, wearing aviator sunglasses, flying with the confidence that came from extensive training and real-world experience. Their eyes met for an instant across miles of desert air, and Chen thought she detected the slightest nod of acknowledgement. Then the civilian aircraft disappeared behind a mountain ridge. Leaving Chen with questions she knew better than to ask, and memories of a night when the line between duty and justice had been drawn by a pilot who'd chosen to serve the Constitution rather than the officials who claimed to represent it. The single-engine Cessna touched down at a small municipal airport in Colorado, its pilot executing a landing that spoke of skills far exceeding those typically required for recreational aviation. The woman who emerged from the cockpit moved with economical precision, her actions efficient and purposeful despite the deliberately casual appearance of her civilian clothes. She paid landing fees with cash, declined offers of fuel service, and completed post-flight procedures with attention to detail that suggested military training carefully concealed beneath civilian camouflage. To observers, she appeared to be another tourist pilot exploring Western landscapes, but her navigation logs told a different story. Precise courses that had carried her over coordinates that didn't appear on civilian charts. From the airport's observation deck, she watched F-35 contrails painting geometric patterns against the afternoon sky. Training exercises, routine operations, the kind of missions that prepared pilots for objectives they couldn't yet imagine. She'd flown similar exercises once, before volunteering for operations that had required her to sacrifice her official identity in service of objectives that transcended personal recognition. Her phone buzzed with a text message from a number that wasn't stored in her contacts. Annual Memorial Service, Arlington, Section 64. Your presence requested but not required. She deleted the message without responding, but the invitation triggered memories of colleagues who died believing in principles that certain officials had corrupted for personal gain. Team Echo deserved remembrance, even if that remembrance had to remain unofficial, anonymous, limited to personnel who understood the distinction between serving your country and serving the people who temporarily controlled its institutions. From her jacket pocket, she removed a photograph that showed 5 pilots in flight suits bearing no identifying patches or insignia. Team Echo in their final official portrait, taken days before operation, nightfall had required them to disappear from official records. 4 of the faces belonged to personnel who died completing their assigned mission. The 5th face belonged to someone who'd officially died, but actually survived to complete a different mission entirely. She placed the photograph in an airport trash receptacle, completing a ritual of letting go that she performed annually. Major Valentina Kozlov existed now only in classified files, and the memories of officials who understood why she'd been sacrificed to protect operations that served essential national security interests. The woman boarding a commercial flight to Denver carried different identification and a different history, but she retained the satisfaction of knowing her sacrifice had prevented greater tragedies. As her airliner lifted off from Colorado's high plains, she caught a final glimpse of contrails dissipating in air too thin for their persistence. Below, the landscape stretched in patterns that had guided navigation for centuries, unchanged by the human conflicts that had required her to abandon everything she'd known about duty, honor, and the price of serving something larger than personal recognition. The flight attendant offered her a drink, and she accepted with a smile that carried no trace of the woman who'd once flown F-35s in service of missions that couldn't be acknowledged. But sometimes, at moments like this, she allowed herself to remember the weight of pilots' wings and the satisfaction of completing objectives that mattered more than the recognition she'd never receive. 5 years after his encounter with the ghost pilot, Colonel Marcus Hayes found himself reviewing classified files that provided context for operations he'd witnessed, without understanding their full significance. His promotion to command of the 422nd Test and Evaluation Squadron had come with clearances that revealed the hidden infrastructure supporting America's most sensitive aviation programs. The file in front of him bore